we'll be looking at a very interesting methodological technique called collocation networks. And we'll be talking about collocation networks in the context of discourse studies. And I know that quite a few people here in the room are interested in discourse and different discourses in their research. Can I have just show of hands how many people have used some discourse analytic techniques? A show of hands. How many people are interested in discourse? Okay, everyone. Discourse is anywhere, right? So, yeah, exactly. Yes, love and discourse. We'll be looking at some of the computational and corpus techniques that will actually help us understand the complexity of discourse. I would like to start with just reflecting on what discourse is about and what the focus on discourse in corpus linguistic means. So I think the first point would be that we are looking at meaning rather than the form. Right? This sounds almost obvious. We all have some linguistic background and we know that meaning is what we are after actually, and different types of meaning, senses of words, collocations, combinations of words. But as I'll show you in a moment, this is not obvious in all approaches to discourse. We are also looking at connections between words. Right? Words in isolation can tell a tiny story, but if you look at words in combinations and cross-associations, then you are starting to get the full picture. You'll never get the full picture, right? But at least you can sort of take a step back and see something from a useful distance. I think the third point is that we are looking at repeated patterns. Patterns that occur over and over again in discourse, because that's how they gain prominence in discourse, right? If you repeat something in a particular context, the association gains strength and prominence, right? And that's how, politicians work, right? They repeat words, even very simple words, in a particular context to convince you about their truth. And, in other spheres of discourse that works the same way. And I think the last point I would like to stress is that we are looking and considering both quantitative but also the qualitative aspects of discourse, and they really go hand in hand. Right? It doesn't mean that because we are doing corpus linguistics and statistics, we should neglect the qualitative aspect that actually provides the explanation for the patterns we see in the data. Some definition of discourse. If we are talking about discourse, let's try to define it together. That's my working definition, and you might agree or you might disagree, but discourse, I think, is about networks of meanings. And the meanings are not only linguistic meanings, but these are social meanings, scientific meanings, when we talk about scientific discourse, in academic writing, for instance. Religious meanings, and all of these combined. Right? So, just to give you a quote from a famous book on discourse by Jan Blomat, he says, "Discourse, to me, comprises all forms of meaningful, semiotic human activity seen in connection with social, cultural, and historical patterns and development of use." Well, he puts it much nicer than I do, but probably the same type of idea, right? We are looking at human activity from the perspective of the meaning of our activity, what we do in our everyday lives, in our everyday communication, and what meaning, implications for other people this has. And that's quite a nice undertaking, isn't it, when we think about it from this perspective. Okay, some bad examples, or examples that are not quite on par with our understanding of discourse as meaningful activity. And you probably see that all around in published work and elsewhere. And it is because it is very easy to produce graphs like these. And we already talked in our Stats Summer School group about the meaning of graphs and meaning of visualizations. And this might be a good starting point, but it certainly is not the end of the linguistic, scientific, social and cultural explanation of what is going on. Just to brief you on what you can see here, this is a graph produced this morning from a Google Books Ngram viewer, and I was looking for the word immigrants there, and it starts historically from the 1800s to 2000 here. Right? So all the books that were published, and these are normalized in some sense, so the data is somewhat comparable. So the story it tells is that we seem to talk about immigrants more and more. Okay, so what? Right? Is it because the book market has changed? Because we publish more social books, and in 1800s, probably the representation of the corpus was different. It might have been more, but we don't know. It might have been more of the fiction genre. And maybe it is true, right, that in our modern consciousness, the immigration, the movement of people around gains some strength. But what if the word immigrant actually has very different meanings in each of the centuries? Right? So for that, the graph won't tell us anything. Right? The graph won't provide any answers about the meaning. It provides the answer about the form. And probably reliable. I don't want to question the reliability of the graph. It is reliable. The question is, to what extent it is valid in terms of our research questions as linguists, sociologists, historians, and so on. I want to show you another possibility of thinking about the same topic. And this is this. There's a graph that I produced using the tool that we will be using in the practical session. And I was looking at the words connected with immigration and immigrants of different sorts in the comments under the Guardian newspaper online articles. So you have the Guardian publishes the official article, but then people can contribute and comment online just below the article. So this is not the official Guardian speaking, but this is the people who read the Guardian online and choose to contribute. Right? So again, from the sampling perspective, there's a sort of very specific sample. It doesn't reflect the population in any way. Right? So we just have to bear this in mind. What you can see here at first sight, and we are looking at the word immigrants here, that you have all sorts of associations: illegal, blaming, blame, compete, seekers, asylum, influx, large influx when you expand the idea, Eastern European, and flocking European. So you might think, well, this is quite a negative picture about immigration, right? It seems like, the influx of immigrants, blame, these are arguably somewhat negative words if you just look at these. But I think we shouldn't stop here, right? The very important and necessary step is to look at the context in which these were uttered. So let's have a look at some of these contexts. Rarely is the distinction made between asylum seekers, immigrants, and illegal immigrants. Right? So someone saying, hang on, you are confusing terms in the debate. So this is a sort of meta-linguistic comment. So no one is accusing of immigrants being illegal immigrants, saying, we have to make that distinction. And then there's another person who rather sympathetically raises the question, is immigrants and asylum seekers some kind of single entity to you? So again, trying to position themselves against someone who would say, let's lump all these people together and let's see this as a problem. Right. Sure, there are issues, but blaming immigrants for everything isn't going to address the real issues, is it? So again, right, when you look at the discourse behind these, it's quite different. Right? something that I would probably expect from the Guardian readers, and so worthy of the Guardian readers in this sense. And you can sort of go further and look at all the examples, right, in the small corpus, and see examples such as, I am an immigrant, I'm the grandchild of immigrants, I know as many immigrants in the UK as native-born citizens. So people identifying themselves with the term immigrant and putting their name forward, saying, yes, here I am, right, as part of the discourse. So again, very, very, very interesting part of debate. Well, you get some negative quotes as well, of course, to be balanced, so it's not all nice. You immigrants are systematically impoverishing the British working class, and you expect gratitude for it. Yes, some sort of anger going through this quote. But when you do some counting, you get something like 65% positive or neutral associations with immigrants when you sort of read the context and try to understand what the discourse is about, what people's opinions are about, when you really listen to the people rather than looking at the curves in the graph, right? When you listen to the discourse and fine-tune to the discourse. So I think, this really gives us the full power of corpus linguistics, the ability to zoom in and zoom out as we explore discourse in this arguably, and people might disagree, more intelligent way than just looking at overall patterns over large stretches of time. Okay, let's start with collocation, because I think for me collocation is a way into discourse. Right? Because I think collocation ticks all the criteria that we had for complex and meaningful understanding of discourse that I listed at the beginning. I know that you've already had a lecture on collocation, so I won't repeat what Andrew Hardy said. But I just would like to go over the basic principles, so to make sure that we are on the same page and understand the basic underpinnings of collocation. Okay. Here's a Wikipedia article on love. I was quite pleasantly surprised that there's a very long Wikipedia article listing all the historical and current meanings and connotations of love. It is quite thorough, and, well, if you are missing something there, you can always contribute and add to this. But I'm using this as an example of a text in which we will be identifying collocations, and precisely the collocations of the word love. So how do we do that in very practical terms? Well, we first highlight the word love in the article, and then we start looking around it in this very particular fashion. This is what the tools are doing in the background. Right? I'm just sort of displaying here on the screen. And what we see is we are looking 2 words to the left and 2 words to the right in this particular case, because it is a very short article. We don't want to highlight everything here. So what we can see already is that we are getting some words that occur in the vicinity, co-occur with the word love. And some of them appear more than once already. These are the words that have the number in the brackets. Right? And we can sort of go on and read the text to the end and read other texts and get the sense of what's happening around the word love. Because the idea is that if the word or words appear around the word of interest that we technically call the node, they have something in common with the word. They shed some light on it. They have some meaning in common, or they provide some meaning for the word. Right? This is sort of sharing of meaning between words by association. And that's the whole principle of collocation. Very simple idea. Right? Words have meanings in common because they share the same specific context. In technical term, we would call this the collocation window, or the span, not the span, but the span of words. 2 left, 2 right in our particular case. And these would be the collocates, or precisely candidates for collocates, because we would have to decide which ones are more important than others. Right. So how would we decide? Well, one text is not enough. So that's why I took the British National Corpus, the 100 million words of British English, both written and spoken, and looked at the top words that co-occur with the word love. And this is just based on pure frequency, right? Of, I, and, in, to, the, you, with, for, a. Not really interesting. Right? A lot of grammatical words there. And if you search for any noun in the English language, you'll pretty much get the same thing. Right? Because nouns are preceded by prepositions and articles. It's a grammatical fact, something that we expect. And, well, we can ask the corpus whether this can be verified empirically, but we don't get beyond grammar if we do just this. So, because we are interested in discourse, we might like to use something more sophisticated, and that's where stats comes in. Right? We use what is called association measures, statistical procedures that will take into account the frequency list, but other criteria I'll mention in a moment as well, and will produce something like this. Again, based on the British National Corpus. MI score in this case, so our association measure, that's a technical term, will help us identify words such as affair, falling in love in various grammatical categories, right? Fall, fallen, fell, and so on. Love making, the sort of physical love story, and also love used as a verb. I'd love to help you, but sorry, I can't, I'm too late. And true love as an association in the British National Corpus. So I think you would probably agree with me that the second list of collocates is more useful from the discourse perspective. And it depends. If you are interested in grammar, you might like to go for the first one. Right? So again, there's no right or wrong answer here. It's about what we are interested in highlighting in language, so different means of highlighting interesting things in language. And as you probably know from the, and this is the score, how I identify the top score, which is most closely associated with love affair. For those who don't mind a bit of statistics, if you do, please, you can check your emails or do something during this slide. But this is how we actually got the number. You need 4 pieces of information. You need to know the size of your corpus, and I know that I'm working with the British National Corpus, so I have 100 million words. Quite a large, solid corpus. I need to know how many times the word love occurs in the text. 22,000 times in the whole British National Corpus, roughly. I need to know the frequency of the collocate affair anywhere in the corpus. Not with love, but anywhere. And I also need to know, and there's the last piece of information I need to know, is the frequency of the co-occurrence, of the collocation. The node love and affair following love. In the window, yes. And this is 200 times in the British National Corpus. And then I can take 2 steps. Yes?
Just a quick question. At which point would you like to distinguish between the nominal and the verbal use of love then?
You can, and you can run it on a sort of part of speech tagged corpus. So you might like to just look for the lemma of the verb to love, and then you would get the I'd love, I love, and these sorts of...
You have different results for collocation and all that.
Yes, yeah. It's a matter of choice. Life is a matter of choice. So research is a matter of choice as well. And yes, you can go more, in sort of this more sophisticated direction. Or you might just look at the forms and distinguish through collocates. Because when you look at the collocates, you can quite clearly see which one come from the verb and which one come from the noun love. So yes, both approaches are possible. Okay, first step. We need to establish a random co-occurrence baseline, or what we call expected frequency. Imagine you have a box, your corpus is a box, and every word is written on a small card. You take the box and you shake it properly, right? This is what we are trying to establish. How many times, purely by chance, the word love and affair would occur? Well, because we don't want to rewrite and retype every word on a small piece of paper. We do it just mathematically like that, right? multiply the frequency of the node by the frequency of the collocate and divide it by the corpus size. In our practical terms, we do this like that. 22,000 times 3,000 divided by 100 million. These are the numbers from the three or four input categories. Sorry, yes. Yeah, sorry, it's a bit jumbled on your on your handout. For those, and this is very advanced, there's a variation on this formula. Sometimes you correct for the window size. So if you have a larger window, you multiply this by the window size. We have a window of 4, 2 left, 2 right, so we just get a slightly larger number. This is just sort of a statistical correction for the window size. If you have a larger window, probabilistically speaking, there's more chance to have just random co-occurrence of words. Right. Okay, expected frequency, our first step. Then the next step, and this is a very simple step, we just compare the expected and what we call the observed frequency. The frequency that we saw in the corpus, the 200. Right? And what do we conclude? Well, 200 is much larger than 2 or 2.64. Right? So, and then we sort of just simply plug it in some sort of equation. And the equation is particular for the particular association measure. I showed you, and here we have the equation for the MI score. Again, don't worry about the details. This is the statistical magic that's happening there. But we are just want to, what it is telling us on a logarithmic scale, which reduces the range of values, we want to see how many times more we can actually observe the collocation love affair in the corpus as opposed to just pure chance. How many times more it appears in the corpus than we would expect by chance alone. Plug in the numbers, get 6.3, and this is the number that you see over there. So we calculated this number, and the corpus tool provided the same number for me. So that's probably correct. Very briefly, when we think about the association measures, and there are dozens of association measures that we can use to highlight different aspects of collocation. We mentioned frequency and MI score, but there is log dice score. Sometimes people use the Z-score, T-score, and other measures. Right? And they always highlight a different aspect of collocation. None of them is right or wrong. They will tell you a different story about the corpus. So what story they are telling depends on which criteria they use and how they highlight these criteria in the corpus. Traditionally, we consider the distance, that's the span, that's your collocation window. So whether you look 2 left, 2 right, or 5 left, 5 right, or 3 left, 3 right, or just 0 left and 1 right. Yeah, depending on what you want to investigate. If you want to investigate the co-occurrence of adjectives and nouns, you might just look at the immediate context. Frequency and exclusivity, these are the two concepts that the association measures highlight very often, and this is highlighted through the association measures such as MI score, which highlights rare exclusivity. MI score is rare exclusivity, words that appear just in each other's company and are not too frequent, right? Which might be good, might be bad. You might like to prefer more frequent words, right? Dispersion, and we talked about the importance of dispersion in the first joint session, the distribution of words across different parts. So we might like to look at dispersion of collocations as well. Do they come just from one text, multiple texts, or are they common across the corpus. Directionality, and there's a particular statistical measure called delta P that will actually help you identify the direction of the collocation measure. Just to give you an example, a good example of directionality is the collocation red herring, the metaphorical use of red herring, right? Something being a red herring. When you see the word red in discourse, any word can follow. A red car, red carpet, right? Whatever, red chair, as in this room. Whereas if you just see the word herring in English discourse, the word red immediately springs to mind. So there's some asymmetry, which we call directionality. Right? So some measures actually can handle this type of construct. Type token distribution, again, I won't have time to go into that, but this means just the competition. How many different collocates compete for the slot around the node, right? Sometimes there are many collocates, sometimes there are just few. And finally, and most importantly, I would argue, in our case, certainly for the discourse purposes, it is the connectivity, the connection between different collocations in discourse, and that's where the idea of collocation networks comes from. Just for purely aesthetic purposes, I'm showing this slide, and to show you the equations of the collocation measures, you might actually note some of those familiar to you, but don't worry about the equations because you have all of them actually in your handout, right? On page 3 of your handout. It's not visible properly, but I'll publish the slides on the website, so you'll be able to see that full screen.
So of course MI is always MI2.
No, MI2 is a version of MI. So it's a squared version of MI. You square the observed frequency and divide it by expected frequency. Delta P is over there. Some of you might recognize the equations. Log ratio, something that Andrew Hardy mentioned, and other empirical values. One of the things, and you don't actually have to remember the equations because the tool that we will be using, called LangsBox, will actually give you the equation as well. Right? So you'll be able to not only to use the equation, but also see the equation and modify the equation if you like. Right? So we'll talk about that in a moment. Here are the equations in just one table, but don't worry about the details. I think one of the things that we might like to think about when we try to think about our appropriate association measure would be to actually think about it in terms of frequency and exclusivity, the two most important concepts that we try to extract from the corpus. So here are our two in this Cartesian system. We have these two measures: frequent, infrequent, exclusive, non-exclusive. And when we think about the individual association measures, we might be able to place them on the scale here or in this two-dimensional space around this. As I said, just for example, the MI score, the famous MI score, is infrequent and exclusive. So we would put it here. Right? Words that are rare but stick together. Right? MI3 is probably more frequent, compensates for the frequency bias of the MI, and is here. If we want something that is purely exclusive but doesn't penalize frequency, and this is very often the case when we want to build dictionaries of collocations, right? Log dice, MI2, they perform in a similar fashion, right? And that's why, for instance, the lexicographers, when they use the sketch engine, for instance, the word sketches are based on log dice, right? Because they are interested in exclusive term extraction, right? So all your dictionaries that use that tool, and major publishing houses use that tool, well, actually look at this side of the spectrum. I'm not saying that this is the correct answer. I'm saying that this is what people do for good reasons. If you want to produce a dictionary, that might be a good idea. However, if you are interested in something that repeats over and over again in discourse, you might look at frequency or T-score. Right? T-score is very close to frequency. So, yes?
Where would you place the Z-score?
That's a good question. I would have to think about it.
Because I would told us it was like a bit of a compromise between exclusive, non-exclusive, frequent, and infrequent.
Yeah. All of them are in some way a compromise between these. So it's not a very helpful definition. I would say you can try an empirical experiment. Just sort your frequency, sort your collocations according to the Z-score, and sort them according to MI score, and see how they differ. Okay. Just going back to the idea of connectivity, our leading idea for this particular lecture, and the idea behind lexical and collocation networks. We start with one word of interest, the node. This is our entry point into the discourse. I'm interested in immigrants. I'm interested in, this social group or that social group, or, any philosophical term I might be trying to explore in the discourse. I look for this term, get the usual sets of collocates, and the tool actually will help us order them and show them in this graphical display. But then I can actually search beyond this, and that's the main idea. I can be searching beyond the first order collocates to be looking at second order collocates, and further on. Any of those collocates can become a new node. And I'll show you real examples in a moment. So this is how collocation networks are built. The idea behind it is that if you look at this collocate and this node, through this association, chain of association and cross-association, there is some sort of cross-bleeding of the meaning. Right? So the initial node gets some meaning, probably not directly, but indirectly via the other associations. And you can actually see a large picture of discourse through these techniques. Yeah. How do we model patterns in text? This is getting somewhat philosophical. When you imagine a star on at night, the first star after the sunset, and then you notice another star, another star, another star, and you start seeing a pattern. So this is a metaphor behind what we are seeing in discourse as well, and just the sheer complexity of the discourse. And we might like to highlight some of these things, but we have to always remember that there's this context that goes beyond what we see in the window of our tool. Okay, so how do we do this practically? And in a moment, we'll go to the computer lab and you'll have a chance to try this yourself. You probably already know about LangsBox, the new tool that we are releasing just this week and just for you, well, for everyone as well, but for you primarily at the Lancaster Summer Schools. And we have already explored some of the other modules of this tool, but today we will be focusing on GraphCall, the graphical collocations tool that actually allows you to build the collocation networks on the fly from this tool. So let me just talk you very briefly through the core features and then we'll have a go at it. It looks like that when you sort of go through the procedures. You will be able to produce a graph like that and actually expand the graph in any way you like and explore this beyond the first level of collocations. I think when we designed the tool, we were thinking about how to make collocations as accessible, but also as systematic and transparent as possible for the scientific purposes. And I think systematic and transparent are two really important words for any scientific inquiry. So this is what you have. You just can analyze multiple texts at the time, multiple corpora at the time, and compare them. Right? So comparison is one of the guiding principles in designing the tool. You always have an option of a split screen where you can compare two corpora or two different words or phrases in the same corpus. So this is what we support. Provides overview of the files that you upload, so you know the size of each file. Again, that helps to trace the dispersion and distribution. And also works with any language. I think that might be good news for many of you who are working on languages other than English. We have full UTF-8 support, so you can load any characters you like, and the tool will still understand them, as long as you have your corpus in the standard UTF-8 plain text format. We also offer all of the commonly used statistical measures in corpus linguistics. So sometimes you are using your tool and you say, I wish I could use this statistical measure. Well, you no longer have to say that, because it's everything is in one box, or LangsBox if you like. If you are not satisfied with these measures, you can define your own and add it to that. You just write the equation for the statistical measure. I'll show you the slide in a moment. So offers a range of useful statistical measures, including useful defaults, so cutoff frequencies that are meaningful in some way. Builds collocation networks on the fly. So this is how it works. You double click on any of those collocates and wait for a moment, and another collocation network appears. And you can sort of drag your graph around or click on another collocate. What you see there is graphical display of the association measure. Imagine the node being a magnet, right? And the node attracts the collocates. So the closer the collocates are to the node, the stronger the association is. Okay, and we can go on and play with that. It's quite addictive, I have to say. I have to warn you, there's some health warning coming with this tool. It's like with computer gaming, it never finishes. But this is for good reasons, I think. Exploring discourse is always fun. Okay. As I said, the third feature of the tool that we are really proud of is that this tool was built by researchers for researchers, and other purposes, pedagogical purposes as well. But I think one thing I want to stress is that it actually allows you to experiment with the concept of collocation in a way that the previous tools do not, because they don't give you access to all the statistical measures. They don't give you access to the equations of the statistical measures. So here's the advanced features. The advanced features are hidden from you unless you want them, but if you want them, they are just one click away, right? This is a feature that allows you to review the equation, and this is the equation for log ratio. I think Andrew mentioned the log ratio, the new statistical measure that he invented for collocation, right? Oh, here it is. Here's the equation, right? If Andrew decides that we should modify the equation, you can just change it over here. And if you think you can improve his equation, again, log ratio 1, right? Save it, and you have it as another statistical measure. It takes just a bit of getting used to this notation, but it will be well documented for you, so you'll know what to type if you need to. These are groovy scripts that the tool takes, sort of standard scripts that allow you to do. But division is equal sign means equal sign, divide means divide. So there's no problem with that. You use standard mathematical notation. Okay, let me go very briefly through some examples, and then we'll go to the computer lab and have a go at this, if you like. With Tony and Steve Wattam, we published a paper that actually described some of the principles underlying the idea of collocation networks. It is open access from IJCL, so you can get it from anywhere freely from the International Journal of Corpus Linguistics. And for that, we used a small specialized corpus of the Society for the Reformation of Manners that was very important and prominent in Britain in the 17th and in the 18th centuries. These were people who were unhappy with people having fun, right? So they were writing letters to the government, to the parliament, to the king, and they were actually trying to prosecute people who, in their opinion, misbehaved and were immoral for all sorts of reasons. And one of the reasons was swearing, right? The Society for the Reformation of Manners didn't like swearing very much. But the interesting thing is that swearing was actually the root of all evil, according to them, as you can see from this collocation network. So swearing was very often associated with drunkenness, right? So if you swear, you drink, that goes without saying in their discourse. Vanity, right? Vain conversations, false, sort of deceitful behavior. Lewdness, right? So there was some sort of sexual improper behavior. Profanity, taking God's name in vain, and all these sort of religious contexts as well. So,
Parliament is interesting.
Parliament, because, yes, you have to look at the context, not to associate it too strongly. They were actually appealing to the Parliament. They were appealing to the Parliament to do something with this horrible, immoral British society at that time. Right? Something has to be done. Well, needless to say that this movement didn't last long. Well, lasted too long probably for its worth, but it then sort of died out when people actually took more liberal views of these very human behaviors. And again, you can explore it with different association measures. The first one was MI2, stressing the exclusivity. This one is actually delta P, looking at the symmetrical or asymmetrical behavior, the directionality of the collocational relationship. What you can see here is that when you expand the network, through swearing, profanation, drunkenness, profane, cursing, all the dire consequences that it has, you get to the people to which the text of these reformers were pointing to, the sort of metaphorical finger, the drunkards, swearers, and lewd persons. Right? These were the people who they wanted to get rid of, or at least eradicate their behaviors. Right? So again, you get from some sort of abstract concept to the real actors, the social actors, right, in one picture. Right? So probably we want to argue that there is some value. It doesn't tell you the whole story, but it tells you an interesting story, arguably. Okay, a modern example, and that's the last example. I looked at the Q&A forums because I was invited to write a chapter for Paul Baker and Jesse Egbert's book, where we do the triangulation of methods. We get the same data set and look at it from different perspectives. I'm using collocation networks as my sort of entry point into the discourse. And we had the Yahoo Q&A forums where people can ask a question and then they get some sort of answers, and we looked at different discourses and different countries as well, people from different countries handling the Q&A sessions in a slightly different way. And when you just look at just the very behavior, just the very purpose of these Q&A sessions, well, question, ask, answer. Well, this is not surprising, but it just shows you how these are related in discourse, right? How questions and answers are related just from the data. They are conceptually related, but they are also related when you look at the discourse. Well, basically, the take-home message from this slide is that collocation networks work, right, as we would probably expect them to. It was also interesting to look at the types of questions that people asked, right? The WH questions. Why, what, how, and who, and what follow there. Mainly grammatical word, apart from what is the difference between something, or what do you think about something. So you would be able to generalize. Or why people do this, and it annoys me immensely, right? So these sort of questions. And we also identified the key discourses, and it was very interesting because we looked at unrelated topics. We looked at topics such as hobbies, right? Very, very sort of general topic. But we looked at across the fora and across different countries, and it was interesting to identify these three almost meta or dominant discourses that were centered around God or religion, love, and the president. Even the British discourse was centered around the American president just looking over the pond and trying to see what's happening in terms of American politics. So these were the sort of comparable discourses that we sort of traced, and you can actually see the associations. God and love are associated, but as you would expect, president has nothing to do with love in this particular case, in this particular type of discourse.
Did you get to this slide by going through keywords first?
I don't believe in keywords very much, so I didn't. I looked at frequency lists.
Did you type God or what?
Yes, I typed all. You can type all three of them and see whether they are related or not.
Okay.
You just search for all three of them and then get your answer, like that. Okay. Thank you.